Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Anthony Gonzalez and I'm the Senior Program Coordinator with the Higher Education Center. And we want to welcome you all today to our webinar titled The Color of College Health, Utilizing the LEAP Strategy to Improve the Well-Being of Minority Students, featuring Santee Ezell. Before we get started with today's content, I do just have a couple of housekeeping slides I'd like to share with everybody. Here on the screen should look somewhat familiar as we are in the Zoom webinar format. We do welcome your questions at any time throughout the live session for our presenter, but we do kindly ask that you utilize the Q&A feature. We do have the chat enabled, so feel free to utilize the chat to introduce yourself and share any reflections and resources as it relates to the presented content. But again, we do kindly ask that you utilize the Q&A feature just so we can kind of keep track of those questions. I do have live captioning enabled for today's session, and you should be able to turn that on to your liking through the bottom dashboard. If you have any troubles getting that set up, please just send me a message and I will try my best to walk you through that process. We also encourage everybody to learn more about becoming a member of the Higher Education Center. You can learn more about the different membership tiers and the benefits that go along with them by visiting our website at hecaod.osu.edu. We also have a few upcoming events that I'd like to share with everybody. Our next free webinar will be taking place next month on November 7th and is titled Alcohol, Cannabis, and Team Success, Lessons from the Field. We also have a new prevention professional series taking place in November titled Fundamentals of Substance Misuse Prevention in Higher Education, and will be taking place November 14th, 15th, and the 22nd, and will be facilitated by our very own Cindy Clowner and Logan Davis. And we also just announced registration is now open for the 2024 Cannabis Symposium. We're excited for the Cannabis Symposium to take place virtually on December 12th, and you can learn more about the full agenda by visiting our website. And with that, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to our presenter today. Joining us today is Santee Ezell, Director of MS Operations with Five Horizons Health Services. Thank you so much for joining us today, Santee, and it's my pleasure turning it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Anthony, and good afternoon, everyone. I am going to share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. If not, please drop it in the chat if you cannot see my screen. But again, I am Santee Ezell. I'm going to share a little bit more about who I am in the next slide, but I'm excited to share more about the research that I have been able to conduct over probably the last 5.5 years. I've had the opportunity to be a part of higher ed and just recently transitioned out, but I will be sharing more about that in the next couple of slides. So before I get started, I think it's very important to acknowledge the land that I'm currently on, especially since I live, learn, play, and thrive in these traditional, ancestral, and unceded homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. So I am in Mississippi, and we are on the land of the Choctaw Nation. And so I want to take the time to recognize those who were enslaved people that were forced to dedicate their labor to the state of Mississippi, but also to our Indigenous forebears who committed to the continued struggle for that. And we are definitely looking at how that helps us when it comes to liberations and reparations for us only through freedom and justice that we truly give that honor on this land. And so just a little bit about me. This is kind of me in a nutshell, but I am a first generation college graduate. I did attend for my undergrad and grad in the state of Mississippi at the University of Southern Mississippi and Delta State. I am from a very small rural town in Mississippi called Calhoun City, and just some things that I have definitely enjoyed doing is reading, traveling. I'm not sure if I have anyone on here that loves to thrift, but I am a thrifter. Favorite holiday is coming up, which is Christmas, but I also love hiking. And I've taken on this new love for tennis. And also I have two kiddos that are both taller than me. And you cannot see this in the photo, but I have on heels and you still see how tall that they are. And so This is just a little bit about me and who I am and me outside of the work that I do. And so I recently shared that I have transitioned out of higher ed as of right at 3 months ago. I am now with a nonprofit organization that is called Five Horizons Health Services, and we focus on providing care for those who are HIV positive. And so these are our five pillars, and some of my work is both done through research and advocacy, and then also assisting with prevention, education, and outreach. And so we have grant related projects from SAMHSA all the way down to some of our local and foundational grants that allow us to do the work that we currently do throughout the state of Mississippi, but also the state of Alabama. And so getting into this presentation, these are some of the objectives, but I'm hoping that you're able to take back at least some strategies with you, especially working on college campuses. I do miss that space, especially working with students, but also connecting with them and hearing what they want to see and what they need when it comes to their health and well being. And so I will be defining the acronym LEAP and those strategies that I have used on campus and in the community. Discuss how health equity should be considered when you're creating a culture of well-being on college campuses. I know for me, when I started in college health, it was more so of me and the staff kind of talking about things we wanted to do, but we were leaving out the most important piece, which were our students, but also breaking it down even further. We were not including each and every one. And I think that is very important. And then hopefully you're able to identify at least 3 to 5 student organizations or departments that you can collaborate with for culturally specific programs. And one of the things that I want to share is you don't have to be the lead. You don't have to be the one that is managing that program. Sometimes it takes mentioning the idea and letting someone else take the lead and you being the support. And then, of course, last but not least, hopefully you're able to develop an action plan to address the needs of minority students on your campus, whether that's for next spring or whether that's preparing for either the next academic year. And so this is one of my favorite quotes. I've been in public health and prevention education since I started my career. I must say that this was my purpose and my calling because my degrees are not in public health or healthcare. I started my journey and just really found a passion and a love for that. So, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that quote has stuck with me since I started my career in diabetes education. But as you look at the healthcare, not only landscape in the community, but thinking about the health and well-being on your college campuses, what are the needs of your students? What are you missing? And thinking about the landscape of Mississippi, I've been here all my life. Over 70% of our state is rural. And so rurality is the life that we live, and just putting that into context, we have some of our spaces throughout the state of Mississippi that may not have an urgent care, they may not have an hospital, they may not have a family, a primary care provider. And so many of our students that have walked onto our campus are coming from rural locations, especially within Mississippi, where they didn't have access, especially to healthcare, or they did not get the education to learn how to navigate the healthcare system. And so we know what has expanded over the last 3 to 4 years when it comes to healthcare, but that is just something that I like to point out, especially when you're trying to understand the landscape of your students. And so higher ed and health. I know many institutions have adopted the Okanagan Charter, and I thoroughly enjoy working through this, especially with a couple of working groups. But I know that every campus, every institution has not been able to actually adopt the Okanagan Charter. But in actuality, you don't have to adopt it to do the work. And so two of those actions that are in this document is one, embedding health in all aspects of campus culture across the administration, your operations, and academic mandates. And so, as you think about the landscape of your institution, where you can embed health and well being is going to be where you begin to see change. And oftentimes, the easiest way to start, especially if you are not a policy person or prefer not to dig into policy, is your student body. And so, when I was in higher ed, I loved peer education and I was able to lead our peer education group. And I got to see so much change because they were already health advocates on their campus in some shape, form, or fashion. And number two, you're able to lead health promotion, action, and collaboration both locally and globally. One of the things I've tried to encourage, especially college campuses, is don't forget about your town and gown relationships when it comes to pouring back into the community. And so, my previous institution, Mississippi State University, we had less than 6,000 students living on campus, but we had so many students who are living within the community of Starkville and students that were distant. And so when you think about leading that action and collaboration, both locally and globally, you have to think beyond the college campus itself. And you have to begin to think about what does this look like even in the community, because your students are part of various communities, but they're also living within the community that the campus resides in. So that's very important. And also thinking about your students who are distant. How are you able to serve them when it comes to health and well-being? And so just a quick activity, and feel free to use the chat. As you think about the well-being of your student population, just think of some words that may come to mind, especially some things you've seen since we are approaching another year and very soon, but we've also experienced COVID. We've also experienced the after effects of that. And just so many things have happened since 2020. And so I want you to share a few words that describe the well being of your student population. And feel free to utilize the chat how you see fit. So, communication styles, skills, social anxiety, difficulty adjusting, belonging, needing connection, absolutely. Thinking styles, gender, race, ethnicity, appearance, absolutely. Anxiety, loneliness. If they're connected to campus, they have a more positive experience. Stress, anxious, lacking, disheartening, overwhelmed, binge drinking, other substance use, not enough attention, absolutely. So the list can go on and on and on. And so I like to do this activity because when we begin to have the conversation, we see that there are a lot of common things that each individual, each faculty or staff can name, but also our students are naming some of these exact same words. Like these are what they are describing as their experience. Um, Under resourced, boredom, stress, ambition, using cannabis to sleep and cope, all of those things. And so when I usually do this activity, it is really, really hard to cut the list down to six, four, or two, because we are seeing students who are coming from different walks of life. They are diverse students. Multiculturalism is on our campus. And so as you look at that wheel and you kind of see different things, our students are coming, and we have traditional and non-traditional students as well on our college campuses. And so we cannot try to do a one size fits all when it comes to serving minority students. And so some of my research that I was able to kind of pick through a little was that as we continue to do assessments, those students were missing at the table. And we weren't able to really paint a picture of what was actually happening with students who identified as minority. And that can mean so many things. Minority has been used, communities of color has been used, historically excluded has been used. There are a lot of words that are being used to describe those who identify as minority. And so it's always good to do activities like this, especially if you're trying to brainstorm what does health and well-being look like on our campuses. And so some of the minority health challenges that I've been able to really gather and look at the data and see what's been happening is that the biggest thing is social determinants of health. And I had to embed that into my work that I was doing at my previous institution. And being in a director role, you have to see the full picture. And that was something that I had to take a step back and really look at. And so in all full transparency, social determinants of health and chronic health conditions were two things that I really did not focus on. But as I began to hear students' story, I was able to see, okay, this is this is something that is happening on our campus, and we're not paying attention to it. And so we hear about food insecurity. We heard about mental health. We heard about sexual assault. We heard about navigating the college experience, just various things like that. But when it came to health disparities, chronic health conditions, or social determinants of health, and even underutilization of services, we were not having that conversation. And so within the last 2 years, we began to utilize the 8 dimensions of wellness a lot more within our work. But as we began to utilize the 8 dimensions of wellness, we saw that it wasn't able to reach every student and they weren't able to see what this looked like. And so as a well-being task force, we began to look at the multicultural wellness wheel. And I love this wheel because it was able to break down personal and family, work site, community, but it also was showing us the work we needed to do on our college campuses. And so as you are looking at the assessment pieces on your campus, as you are looking at the gaps that exist, begin to just have small conversations with your students. Um, and for me, it was something that, of course, I wasn't thinking about, but you may have a student who have a chronic health condition. You may have a student that come from a food insecure area. So for me, my hometown is a food desert, it is a medical desert, it is a maternal health desert. We are in the obesity and stroke desert as well. And so the South especially experience a lot of those deserts because we either don't have access at all or we have little access. And so when you are thinking about how to serve students, you got to think about the whole student and not just the partiality of that student and what you're seeing on the surface. And so, just some data that I wanted to share as I kind of mentioned chronic health conditions. And so, the National College Health Assessment has released their 2024 spring data. And so, if you are part of the American College Health Association, or even if you're not, I encourage you to go to their website. They have a entire new resource data hub that is amazing. But we've participated in that in the previous years. And so, some of the things that I want to point out especially that we may not be thinking about. And I also want to say it is not your role as a health and well-being office to do this work. One of the things that I had to advocate for is that health and well-being is the responsibility of each and every person on your college campus. They are able to contribute in ways that you may not even think. So don't think that you are the only person or your office is the only office that can do that work, but you can take the lead or you can give expertise or provide resources. And so as you look at type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but I also want you to go down to pre-diabetes or insulin resistance. As I mentioned before, in the state of Mississippi, we are known as diabetes and stroke and obesity, that we are on that line. And so you think about students who may not know or students who may know that they are in the pre-diabetes stage. And so making sure that they have the proper nutrition, the resources, and all of those things are very important. And as you kind of look from side to side, you'll see other things as far as chronic or ongoing medical conditions that were mentioned within the National College Health Assessment Survey. And so just kind of thinking of what not only your health and well-being office offer, but what is it that your health center offers as well. And so thinking about high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And so these were things as a college student, I have to be honest, in undergrad, I was not thinking about. But we are seeing more and more students who are coming to our college campuses with chronic health conditions. And not only that, they may not know how to navigate that if it's been in the home with their parents or in their or with a guardian. And so now they're having to navigate that on their own. And so as you think about students that you're serving, particularly minority students, because minority students are at a greater risk for different types of chronic health conditions and medical conditions. And so thinking about myself, diabetes, high blood pressure, and stroke runs in my family. And so those are things that I did not think about until my provider began to ask me the question about my family history. And so it's as easy as having a conversation with college students and learning about, well, what is your family history, especially if you're doing a workshop or a program, to learn more about your students and being able to educate them on the different types of chronic health conditions. And so kind of shared that a little bit more, but these are just not a few, but a list that I was able to kind of gather, especially as I was doing research. And so this was very interesting to see because we began to have conversations on how do we handle these situations as they arise on our college campus? Do we have a specialist in our area? If not, how do we connect them to the next resource if our health center are not able to meet the needs? And there are a lot of things that we could not do on the prevention education and outreach side only because that was our main focus. And so we're not there to diagnose or treat. And so connecting them to the resources that they needed were very important. And so this recent academic wheel of privilege was posted on LinkedIn by the University of Kentucky. I think it was their academic research office. And this was very interesting to me because as you think about the landscape of your campus, multiculturalism, minority students, and you think about how each one of these impact our students more than we know, especially as they look at this academic wheel of privilege. And even just thinking about yourself, taking a step back and looking at, okay, how does this wheel impact me? And it may be in a positive or it could be in a negative way. And as you can see, um, in the middle of this wheel, you can kind of see what that may look like. And so it goes from gender, sexuality, neurodiversity, mental health, and then it goes from career stage, funding and resources, caring duties, current wealth, just various things like that. And when you are really evaluating the landscape of your campus and where your students are coming from, you learn a lot about them, not only just about their health and well being, but you learn about their family. You learn that students may be caregivers, they may be caring for someone that are back home, they may be providing financial assistance. There are a lot of things that come into play when you begin to look at the whole student and what they may have experienced prior to campus and what they are currently experiencing. And so when you think of multiculturalism, you know, it's not just race and gender, but we have to take in account of sexuality, disability. We have to take in account of not just only religion, but spirituality and various things like that. And so this is just something that I thought that was beneficial for me to take a step back and look, especially as I'm serving um, different individuals on various levels. And so these are three of my favorite quotes that have stuck with me since I've started higher education, and really been able to sit among some great mentors that have been doing the work for years and really have seen the landscape of things change on their college campus. And so, as a peer educator, I was able to learn different things, and then I decided to become an advisor, and I thought it would be beneficial for me to go through NASPA's Peer Advisors Academy. And so these are three quotes that have stuck with me, which the first one, as you see, systems of higher education are built by and reinforce systems of inequity, oppression, and white supremacy. And that was in our NASPA Peer Advisors Academy. And so we were really looking at how does peer education impact all students, and how can we make sure that all students are included. And so things one thing stick out to me is systems of inequity, but also as we look at different types of inequalities. The second one, maybe you're searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots. And so oftentimes when students are coming to our college campuses, we're only getting the surface of them. And if we never make that connection with them, that is all that we get. And so we get the branches. And most of the time, if students don't have a connection or a relationship with us, we hear a few things. I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. And I'm doing good. As you begin to dig a little bit deeper and you reach the roots, you find out that students are not well, not just by looking at data, but you're having conversations, you're making connections across campus, and you're really hearing what students are saying and what's happening and what they're doing. And then, of course, the third one, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And so thinking about the policies, the structures, the systems on your college campuses, and I know oftentimes it's hard to make those changes when it comes to policy and to do that work, but we have to be willing to work together, but also be willing to make those structures and those systems change because you are impacting students each and every day in the work that we do. And so, kind of diving in a little bit deeper, and one thing that I was able to realize is that our assessment that we were currently using was only giving us a single story. And so, one of the things that I pointed out to our team when I was at Mississippi State was that, hey, we are not getting who we really need to fill out these surveys. How can we change that? What is something we can do differently? And so, even across our departmental and all the way up to our national college health assessment data, even our healthy minds, we were seeing that um, Caucasian white females were always completing our survey. And we would have almost 80% of those surveys that were completed were by white females. And so as we began to look at the data, we were like, we're not having an overall what it should look like, especially on our college campus, is not a representative sample. And so we had to do things a little bit differently. So when we did our Healthy Mind survey, we were intentional about reaching out to student organizations that we needed data from. And so FLAIR, that is an LGBTQ plus population, that is an organization that serves that population specifically on campus. We have a graduate student association. We have a Latino student association. We have a Black student association. We had a pre-med group. And we had our general student association. So our goal was to make sure we were in the room, we were in the faces of those that we needed that information from. And so the single story of stereotypes, the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. And so one of the things that I didn't want to continue to do in assessment was only seeing the narrative of one population or one gender. Or we were only identifying on those surveys female, and male. And so we had to think about sexuality. We had to think about who were we missing, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to capture that. And so if you don't take anything else from this presentation, I think it's very important for you to evaluate your assessment pieces that you're using and what you are including and what you're excluding. Because the most important thing is if you're not able to get a representative sample, you are just sharing the story of possibly one population that you are serving. And so we had to do things a little bit differently in order to reach the students that really needed us. And so, kind of setting the stage, thinking about students of color, students that identify as minority, historically excluded, is very important. And you've already shared it in the activity earlier. But underutilization of services was mentioned earlier, but also students also experience isolation. And so thinking about if you're at a predominantly white institution, if you're at a HBCU, if you're at a minority serving institution, community college, whatever it may be, thinking about how your students are feeling as they walk onto that college campus. And so thinking about, do they even know how to navigate the classroom, the services that are being offered? And so oftentimes students of color tend to experience a greater feeling of isolation. So they don't have a sense of belonging at predominantly white institutions. And number two, thinking about mental health services are underutilized by ethnic minorities, both on college campuses and, of course, within the nation as a whole. And so thinking about how your students transition from their community, a college campus, and going back into possibly their hometown community, or they may be moving to somewhere else. And so each and everything that we do on a college campus impacts our students more than we know. And so I won't go through this full diagram, but I think it's very important that we understand that there's historical trauma and there's also health. Both of these play a role in our students' lives. They may not ever talk about the historical trauma that they have experienced. However, that trauma comes on that college campus. And so trauma and everything, it may be physiological, it may be environmental, just various things. They may not have any protective factors that they're coming on your college campus with. So they're having to learn that. They may have more risk factors than they do protective factors. And so thinking about when your college student come on your campus, you have to look at the whole picture. And so what does that look like as your students are responding to various things that are happening on their college campus, things that are happening at home, and things that are even happening with them? And so believe it or not, historical trauma impacts us more than we know. And just thinking about trauma within the last few years, COVID was definitely traumatizing for a lot of people because we lost a lot of lives during that time. And so just thinking about the historical trauma of minority students and what they may have experienced, but also how does that influence health disparities, social determinants of health, and how they actually navigate college is going to be very important. And what did they learn in their home before they arrive? And so it's hard to kind of break bad habits or things that they have learned. And so I'm in this process of unlearning. And so you have to look at your college students at the same way. What are they going to have? What are some things that we have to unlearn as professionals, but also our students? And so the biggest issue is the system and the environment. And so thinking about the historical trauma, thinking about how that influenced health disparities, and think about how many of historically excluded minority communities of colors have been impacted. The distrust of medical providers, structural racism, even less access to quality medical care. So I kind of share with you a little bit about the landscape of Mississippi. And just to provide context, the nearest specialist for me is probably an hour. But if I want to get a specialist that serves at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, I have to drive 2 hours. And so thinking about the landscape of where your students are coming from is very important. Healthcare providers are less likely to give advanced care and more likely to have pre-existing health conditions. And so thinking about, are your students coming with pre-existing health conditions? What does that look like? Do they feel comfortable going to their health center, coming to you to have those conversations? And so serving minority students is going to look different. And you may not identify with a minority student, but that doesn't mean that you cannot serve them in different ways and you cannot make an impact in their lives as they navigate that college campus. And so the leave strategy was just something that I kind of took upon myself to kind of dig a little deeper and find out what was needed on our college campus at that time. And although health promotion was our main focus, there were some things that were missing. And so we were not having the conversation about health literacy. And it wasn't something that I was like, oh, well, each student should be able to read this brochure, or they should be able to navigate this, or they shouldn't have any problems with this, or they should be able to ask those questions. And so oftentimes, and for me, and I want to speak for myself, I assumed that students knew and they did not know. And so I had to make sure that I changed the language for myself in order for students to grasp either the healthcare system that we had, understanding the health center, understanding what we do and what that looks like. And so this is the LEAP strategy, and I'll share a little bit of what I've been able to do and kind of what I'm continuing to do. So health literacy, health equity, health assessments, and health promotion. And so over time, you'll continue to do the work of health promotion, but that also takes, how are we including that when it comes to health literacy? What does health equity look like on our campus, and what do our health assessments look like? And so health literacy on campus, um, our college students are impacted and influenced by their demographic characteristics. And so thinking about, how do you connect with students and what does health literacy look like? I know everybody was saying go to social media for various things, but how do we address health literacy in various ways? And so before I had left Mississippi State, one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure that we had a graduate student who was bilingual, that was able to actually really push out information, because we weren't able to, but push out information because we had a large international population, but we weren't able to provide any other information in any other language besides English. And so thinking about how health literacy impacts our students, thinking about your health center and the information that you're giving, are you able to provide that in more than one language? Do you have an interpreter? Those were things that I wasn't thinking about when I first started in my role, but it was very important that we think about health literacy and what does that look like on our college campus. And having individuals a part of your team, are, especially if it's students, if it's staff, if it's health center staff, that are able to identify with those that you are serving. And so some of the greatest disparities in health literacy among racial and ethnic minority groups from different cultures are those who do not speak English as a first language. And that was something that, as a growing campus and institution, we had students that literally represented every country. And so one of the things that we had to take in account for was, are we able to produce the necessary graphics, the information and resources that is needed for the students that we were currently serving? And unfortunately, we were not able to do that. And so just thinking about, how does health literacy impact our students? Walking them through the health insurance process, explaining to them, what does it mean to get a preventative or wellness checkup? Many of your college students are only going to the health center when they're sick. So being able to promote information, and hopefully students are able to understand and comprehend the information that we were sharing. Health equity on our campus, looking at the landscape of your campus, partnering with cultural and ethnic organizations to find out their needs. Plan and host culturally specific programs to improve health literacy and education. One of the things that I definitely want to encourage the team to do is you can be as creative as you want to be. If you want to reach different student organizations that represent various populations, how can you partner with them? When you're developing policies, how does that support the whole student? Making sure that it's just not a single story or just your view or one view, but how do we support the whole student? And then you want to make sure you provide services and resources that are culturally feasible to access. And so thinking about where are you located on campus? And I know we can't always change our location, but thinking about are your services culturally feasible? Are they relatable to that population that you are serving? And so a great example was looking at how could we serve the graduate students because we were solely focused on undergraduate students. And so we reached out to the Graduate Student Association and they began to host, they were already hosting events for wellness, but Wellness Wednesday was something that we did as well. So why not partner? Also, we had international students, but we also had international families coming to those Graduate Student Association events. So, how can we make sure that those services are culturally feasible and accessible? And so, your health assessment on campus, as you kind of look at the health assessment on your college campus, I always share, especially we just had a great session on the biennial review. Academic and student affairs should be working together. And that is how you begin to embed health and well being on your college campus. I am pretty sure you know a faculty or a staff member that are advocates for health and well being, whether they are doing that in their community or their church. How can they do that on your campus? And so, academic and student affairs should be working together because we are there to serve the students. Number two, leveraging compliance as a tool for your programming. That biennial review is very important. Those annual reports, especially within the Division of Student Affairs, are very important. So, how can you utilize what you are doing as a compliance mechanism and actually leveraging that for the work that you're currently doing? And then, of course, incorporating the social determinants of health in the needs assessment process. You learn a lot about your students when you look at the social determinants of health. So, looking at their community, their education, what does that community look like, their housing, their resources, just various things like that, you'll learn a lot. I am more of I am a storyteller. I love stories. I love to hear from students. And so I am a qualitative person, and I know that really takes time. But I know that there are individuals who prefer quantitative, and I don't mind quantitative, but I love the stories because I get to dive in a little bit deeper and find out about students when I'm able to do focus groups and things like that. And just pop up at meetings, introduce myself, but also let them know how we're here to serve them. And then, of course, go beyond who is sitting in the room. I've been on task force, I've been a part of different um, meetings and groups, and oftentimes we know who we want sitting in the room, but we when we look around that room, who are we missing? And so making sure you're including students, but making sure you're including students from different walks of life to sit among those task force, those meetings to help you serve them, but also making sure that that we're looking beyond our perspective. And then be intentional about who we turn to for the answers. I know that we are professionals, are experts. We love the work we do. We impact our students more than we know. But oftentimes, some of our answers are really taking the time to step back and seeing the full picture, but also having a conversation with our students. And so, seeing how you can change that landscape and asking the students, how can we serve you? What are some things you want to see? If we change our current programming, what would you like to see from us in the spring? How can we best serve you? So that is very important, especially as you are doing the health and well-being on your college campus. And then, of course, thinking about health promotion on your campus. Culturally specific data aligns with your best practices and policies. So that is very important. Using a culturally humble approach in program planning. One of the things that I had to do and step back and realize is I won't always have the answers for that program planning. I don't always have to take the lead. So while this may be an idea, who can we partner with, collaborate with to bring this to fruition? And so we had student organizations, but then we also had departments that we could partner with. And so incorporate a diverse group of peer educators or ambassadors within your department to collect the data. And so I always said this, students may not want to see Santee on the drill field today. So what can we do differently? And then thinking about health promotion and thinking about the landscape and where your students are coming from, what does this look like? Wraparound services is really what is taking place on our campus. And so college campuses are now, they have food pantries, we have housing, we have our student counseling services, making sure they sleep, but then also hygiene, financial literacy, what all that looks like. And thinking about how those wraparound services are meeting the needs of our students. And so health promotion isn't always a program or a workshop. Health promotion is the work that is currently being done by the campus. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it is everyone's responsibility to do this work. And so, if you are in financial aid, you are actually contributing to a student's financial health. You're contributing and giving them the information they need for financial literacy. If there is a child care facility on your campus or a child care development center, and you have a student that identifies as a parent, that is impacting their health and well-being, and we are collectively working together. And so looking at health and well-being from a different landscape is going to be very important. And it's just not a workshop, it's just not a program, it's just not a walk, it's something much bigger, because as they leave your campus, they're going to be impacted by the community that they live, work, play, and serve in more than you know. And so this is LEAP in action on your campuses. One of the things, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I love policy. And I'll dig a little deeper into policy. I may not always get the answers I want, or may not be able to navigate that process just as how I would like it to have gone, but it is something that is near and dear to my heart. And so one of the things that I mentioned is a lactation support policy for everyone. And as I had looked at our policy, it only had faculty and staff, and we had students that identified as parents. And so sometimes it may be you advocated for 2 or 3 words to go into a policy. And so making sure that exists. LEAP in action may be providing free menstrual hygiene products and Plan Bs to young ladies who are in need of that and they cannot afford. Condom distribution and overdose prevention boxes within residence halls. And so you are taking action across campus. Some of you are already doing this work, but this is what it looks like. Even free printing services. Not everybody has a library card. Not everybody knows how to navigate the library. So what could your department or organization do? Recovery lounge space with snacks. Our students love snacks. They love to nap. They love to sleep. So how can you change your space if you do have, if you do serve those who are in recovery? Wellness on Wheels card. What does that look like? How are you able to meet the needs of our students at a common location that they gather? And then, of course, free STI HIV testing. We've done that. We've even done reduced cost testing, but not everybody can afford that. So how can we make sure it's accessible and our students are able to utilize that service? And then, of course, the well-being policies are very important on your college campus. Believe it or not, that is how we see things in action, taking place and actually making a difference on our campus. And so just some other things to kind of think about as you think about programs, as you think about partnerships, as you think about developing an action plan, what can you do differently on your college campus when it comes to health and well-being? And so one of the things that I absolutely love is that Mississippi State has men of excellence. And so they always done barbershop talk. And that was an opportunity for gentlemen to get free haircuts, but they also were able to have conversations about their mental health. Thinking about your we just ended Hispanic Heritage Month, but thinking about how you can be a part of those awareness days and months. You don't necessarily have to do the program itself, but how can you say, we're going to partner, we're going to collaborate, let us learn from you? Thinking about not only focusing on women's health, but how are we incorporating men's health? Men are usually a minority on our college campuses, and we don't always look at it in that manner, but thinking about them completing our assessments, thinking about how they engage in our programming. And so we're often focused on a one size fits all approach for health and well-being, but we have to make sure we make those changes as needed so we are reaching students who are a part of various diverse groups and they represent the multiculturalism on your college campus. And so here are just some reflection questions for you to kind of think about. Don't have to answer right now, but who are your health advocates on your campus that you can make connections with? What are you hearing and seeing on campus when it comes to well-being? How are you currently promoting well-being? And when do your students gather in common places? And so thinking about how you're able to connect with students in various spaces and places in order to have these conversations about health and well-being. So thinking about your students, where do your young men gather? Where do your students who have a spiritual connection, who really thrives in interfaith dialogue, where do they gather? Thinking about students who identify as a person with a disability, where do they gather? And so thinking about all these reflection questions and how you can form something much bigger outside of your department, outside of your office, in order to make sure all students are being included and they're not excluded. And so I mentioned this quote earlier, and it has stuck with me. My mentor, Dr. Santee Elbert, this is something that has stuck with me since the beginning, especially working with her. But maybe you're searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots. And so oftentimes we see the surface of our students, but we don't see the whole student, and we don't get to see the root causes. And so we have to go beyond the branches and begin to search at the roots to what's actually taking place or impacting our students. And I won't go through this full photo because I know our time is quickly coming to an end, but I want us to be mindful as we're serving minority students. And I know you may say, well, how do I have the time to do all of this? Sometimes it's conversations. Sometimes it's engaging student organizations to find out what may be impacting our students. And so it's very important that you not only do that work, but also including those across campus that can do that work as well. And so lastly, here are more equity reflection questions for you. When is the last time you assessed your campus equity data? So looking at your data and see where the gaps are and what's missing, whose voice you haven't heard. What do you know about the interests and needs of minority students? So thinking about what does that look like? One of my favorite books that I decided to take upon myself was Multiculturalism on Campus, where I looked at the theories, the models, and practices. Because just because I may identify as being a minority, that doesn't mean that I know the whole story. And so it can't be Santee's story. I have to make sure that I'm still having that conversation and engaging on campus. With whom are you not yet collaborating with but could? Very important for you to answer that question, but also thinking about what could you do differently going into the spring semester, or thinking about who have you not collaborated with and how are you currently serving minority populations on your campus. So not just looking at race and gender, but also looking at various ways you could serve students and provide the resources, but also it may be a workshop, it may be a focus group in order to serve the students that need your services. And so these are just some of my lessons learned in the work that I was doing, that I'm continuing to do from a different lens. Um, and so we have to understand that college students come from intersecting identities, even our faculty and staff as well. The culture and climate of our campus impacts the health outcomes. And so I know it's hard to measure how health outcomes on our campus, but sometimes that conversation, sometimes going to that student organization meeting can begin to shift change in a small way, but makes a bigger impact. The work we do either help or hinder minority students' well-being beyond college. And so each and every day, you have to do things on purpose to impact our students in a positive way. And what does that look like? Sometimes it may be meetings all day, but how are you advocating for them? Partnerships with minority faculty, staff, and student orgs lead to inclusive and equitable practices. And then ensuring diverse perspectives in assessment and promotion efforts is very important. You don't want to do a one size fits all. And then, of course, structures and systems should be evaluated just like the policies that we have in place and that we review, either whether it may be on an annual, every 5 years, whatever that may look like. And so these are my final thoughts. I think the most important thing, and I've said this a couple of times, is there shouldn't be a one size fits all approach for the work that you're doing. And you don't have to do the same program for 10 plus years. You can change it up. As you get new students every year, you're getting a new group. And I can attest to that. I am completely different from my two teenagers. And so I'm learning about them more and more. And I know COVID had an impact on their social well being and how they communicate, but knowing that there's not a one size fits all. You have to understand that your campus and your students are evolving and ever changing. Working with middle school, high school, and college students have been completely different from being back into the community. And so you're looking at the different dimensions and intersections. And so students face health concerns differently, and our environment plays a role in how they handle that, especially if they are on a college campus. So thinking about those things are very, very important. Final things, with this strategy, I've kind of turned it into a research lab where we'll be able to conduct research and kind of look at our communities of color in Mississippi. I'm excited to see this unfold because I'll have the opportunity to continue to work with college students who are in pre-med field or they are interested in health disparities, public health. So I'm excited to see how this unfold, since I've taken a step away from higher ed. But this is something that I hope to see grow, but also improve the health outcomes of our state. These are my references. And this is my contact information. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts or need any brainstorming moments, this is my contact information. I know Anthony shared that you would get a copy of this PowerPoint. And so I am going to stop sharing my screen at this time.
Well, thank you so much, Santee. Thank you again for, sharing of yourself and expertise. It's always a pleasure for the opportunity to get to learn from you. I am just going to share my screen for a couple of housekeeping slides. I did drop access to the slides in the chat, so you do have access to Santee's contact information if you have any questions. Of course, today's session has been recorded, so you can expect to see the session recording added to our website within 3 business days. We do have just a few upcoming events I'd like to share with everybody. We have a free webinar taking place on November 7th and is titled Alcohol, Cannabis, and Team Success, Lessons from the Field. We also have our new prevention professional training series taking place November 14th, 15th, and the 22nd, and is titled Fundamentals of Substance Misuse Prevention in Higher Education. And of course, we have just opened up our registration for our 2024 Cannabis Symposium that will be taking place virtually on December 12th. And you can learn more about the full agenda by visiting our website. And so here's a few ways that you can connect with us. And again, today's session has been recorded, so you can expect to see that uploaded to our website within 3 business days. Thank you again, Santee, and thank you to everybody who joined us. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care, all.